bottom line.
Here's the bottom line.
We need to get to the bottom of this.
Get to the bottom of this.
We've got to get to the bottom of this.
The bottom line on the Marc Cox Show.
That's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of this.
That's the bottom line.
Truth! You can't handle the truth.
How many more must die? 100, 1,000, 10,000, a million? What is your blood price?
Congressman John Lewis there, among those leading the call for dramatic gun law changes after what's happened. And welcome in my friend Scott Jones to the program, who's been in on a number of occasions. Scott, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing fine. I figured you needed a little rating spike. So
I did need, absolutely. That's why I called you in here. I want you to get my folks fired up.
I always hear the calls after I leave. Who was that knucklehead?
You're in the car banging on the radio because you can't say anything else once you're out of here. That's the whole thing. That's it. Where are you on this gun control issue? I think this is a knee-jerk reaction that's going to result in legislation that doesn't accomplish anything.
It is beyond knee-jerk. In fact, even before you called me about coming on, I was thinking about this, and I think we kind of minorly had this conversation, and I did say I was going to have a little bad taste humor here when you talked about the cannolis, and my first thought was, all right, leave the gun, grab the cannolis.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, unless you already told
the
me
old
joke.
Yeah.
Did you already do that one? Okay.
No, I did not.
Okay. Anyway, so what I was thinking about when I was young, every father I knew always had a pistol on him. Had it in his back pocket, in his sock.
Somewhere.
Walking around the house, somewhere. That was just the culture. Everybody I knew that hunted, they had their guns hanging on the wall, propped up in the corner. Nobody dared go near them if you were a child. I grew up, nothing I loved doing more than playing war. I had my M16 Marauder, I had my Tommy gun, I had my 6-shooters, and all we did all day was play war and combat.
I did the same thing.
Everybody that's probably 45 on down probably did the same thing. The gun culture was not really nobody. I don't even think there was a word called gun culture back then. People used firearms for what they were, I guess, intended to: safety, combat, whatever. Criminals used them, of course, but there was not a cult. It didn't seem like, even though I hate saying it, this country was founded on violence and all that stuff. You can go into history and however you want to do it, but nobody thought of guns the way they think of them now. It's almost, there's a whole different mindset when it comes to guns, to me. And to me, the solution's actually pretty simple. Because you're not going to ban guns. That's just stupid.
No, right. It's
and
impossible.
You cannot legislate crazy. That guy was a nut. There was nothing that anybody in the world could have done to predict this or to stop it. I don't care. We could talk about it until we're all purple in the face. Nothing could have stopped this. But what can you do? Guess what? Enforce the laws on the books.
Thank you.
If you use guns illegally, you should go to jail. If you bring you want to do some legislation that works, if you use a gun in a robbery, a felony, 20 years, period.
No early parole. No nothing. No, thank you.
Nothing. If you are if you are a felon with a gun and are caught, you go back.
I'm with you, but I'm looking at your social media feed, and liberals are defriending you by the hundreds right now.
And you know what?
How can you be like this? Your friends.
I don't care about that because I try to be reasonable and logical.
I see that.
And we can, I love John Lewis. He did so much, but to sit there and scream about what he's screaming about, you cannot legislate crazy.
Well, you can't legislate crazy, but I guess my question for Congressman Lewis, if I could get him on here, is when is he going to start screaming about what goes on in Chicago and North St. Louis, where a lot of the death toll that we talk about with guns is black-on-black crime, right?
Well, there's a gigantic difference there as well. Crime is a product of poverty and lack of education, and in the case of the black community, systematic historical racism as far as redlining and poor services. I mean, the list goes on, the reasons for crime. But to your end, let's not mention the fact that release of felons, the release of felons, the free flow of drugs, the free flow of firearms. I mean, there's so much that goes into black on black crime as opposed to any other crime. There's so much more that goes into it than just saying, well, what are you going to do about the guns on those streets? Well, guess what? Most of those people that commit those crimes have a rap sheet 47 miles long. So don't let them out.
Yeah, well, I
do not understand how somebody that just got out of jail or parole for attempted murder is back on the street in 3 weeks. I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't understand it either.
You'd have to get a lawyer in here to break that one down.
Right, but if they wouldn't let you in the city of Chicago because Rahm Emanuel and the progressive left that controls that city always want to point the finger at guns. When, as you've mentioned, the problem with crime is much deeper than that.
Way deeper than that. And if you just, it's like, that's like saying the problem with vehicular homicide are cars. It's the people in the cars.
Thank you.
And it's the people behind the guns. I know, I hate saying them, like you said. Just like you said, my friends are probably defriending me by the dozens and hundreds right now. There are probably Republicans lining up the street dying here in the NRA saying, okay, we might look at
right.
Gun control.
Yeah, I was a little surprised with that, but I think that there's a little strategery there on the part of the NRA because they hadn't said anything about this up until now, but they say that they're willing to give in on that.
And you know what? There are things out there that probably can be discussed, but the bottom line is once you make the rules, like I had a guy who's a very avid listener of yours, and I'm not going to drop a name because that's what they call this shameless
That's going to
plug.
make him feel good if you do that, but go ahead.
Okay, well, all right. But he knows what I'm talking about. But what he suggested to me yesterday was find a guy that fixed this guy's weapons to be automatic. That's the guy that should go to jail along with the shooter.
You mean who put the bump stocks on for
Whoever
him?
put the bump stops or whatever the other guy called the kill stops or whatever.
Zip stop.
The zip stop,
is
yeah.
what he called it.
In fact, I was thinking, boy, I never heard of that.
Me
one.
neither. I'm
But
trying to Google it, and he was just
find a guy that makes legal weapons illegal. Put him in jail. We've got the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, a whole big division in this whole big branch of the government. Make their sole purpose find people that use guns illegally and put them in jail. If you sell them illegally, if you manufacture them illegally, if you whatever you can do to a gun to make it illegal, find those guys, put them in jail.
Well, we agree with most on my argument earlier has been nobody's proposed anything to me so far that would have prevented what happened
Because
there
they can't.
or Newtown or any of these places.
You can't legislate crazy. You go back, 1966, guy climbed up in a tower in Austin, Texas, picked people off. Marine is a great line
was a sniper.
A sniper, great line out of the movie Full Metal Jacket. Where did he learn to shoot? In the Marines. That doesn't make him crazy. That means he just knew how to shoot, and one day something snapped, and he started shooting people. You can't legislate crazy. Nothing you can do about that. But what you can do, you can legislate the guys that walk into schools with guns that should never have been out in the street to begin with.
All right.
People that should never, so that's my take on that.
Switching gears, you can have legislators who are crazy, like the Board of Aldermen in the city of St. Louis.
There are a few of those, that's for sure.
Well, I'm telling you, because I've argued all along that when it comes to calls for changes in the judicial system, which is what a lot of folks have been calling for since Ferguson, part of that was taking away the responsibility from the party that committed the crime or reducing that responsibility or not enforcing it. And now this Alderwoman Green comes along and she introduces legislation that would prevent the police it would change the ordinance on demonstrating in the city so people could occupy streets and the police had to warn it couldn't use pepper spray and it would restrict all these different ways of enforcing the law. What's wrong with enforcing the law?
Nothing. But what you have to do is, again, this is another one that's going to probably make some of my friends crazy and want to defriend me, but I'm going to say it anyway. Protesters, I hear people say all the time, well, this is not your grandparents' revolution. We ain't like the 60s. Well, guess what, folks? You should think like they did in the 60s. Because guess what? Protests that have a focus and a cause and a reason and a structure get results, okay? The people that organized protests in the 60s knew exactly what they were doing. It was not knee-jerk. And this is just my opinion. You guys, people that are doing this probably had very well intended. We're going to block Highway 40. Well, great. What does that do?
Well,
but
there are multiple groups doing it. right? It's not one group of people.
Because the causes are so real. Sometimes how you implement your thought process, because social media has really changed so much when it comes to making protests. Now, again, everything that they are protesting for, I 100% agree with. However, sometimes the implementation of it is different. And guess what? If you protest and you break whatever the ordinance are, guess what? You're going to go to jail. You're going to get pepper sprayed. You're going to get beat down.
Well, you're probably not now.
Well, but you should if it comes up. Let me tell you something. In the 60s, my mother was arrested. She got a medal from the group she was in. She got arrested probably 5, 6, 7, 8 times protesting in the 60s for things that they felt were very strong.
Right.
I'm a believer that today.
But she wasn't arrested for violence. She was arrested for sit-ins and things like that,
She was
right?
standing there for sit-ins and would just get sticks stuck up her head just because she was in a protest. That's a little different. Now, there's so much restraint, which is probably a good thing. You can't turn a hose on peaceful protesters anymore like they did in the 60s. You know, Bull Connor, I don't know if you can get away with him anymore.
No.
I know they try. So, anyway, I'm sorry. That might have got off your point.
No, not at all. I
know, and we were going with the cameras and the restrictions. If you're going to be a police officer, you have to understand the situations that you are dealing with, and you have to have a level of restraint. I remember when I walked out last time, because we talked about this pre-verdict, about what may or may not happen, and a caller called in and said something about, well, if I'm a police officer, somebody throws urine or a brick at me, then I think I should be in my rights to defend myself. Well, guess what? Not really.
What do you mean, not really?
Well, what are you going to do?
That's assault.
Okay, but guess what? You're right. That's assault, but that doesn't mean you get to shoot.
Well, not shoot. When it was talking about shooting.
I think that's where that guy was going. But guess what?
No.
You do get to defend yourself. If somebody takes a protest to that level, then you're going to get yourself in trouble.
You texted me the other day when I was talking about the thing at the Galleria where the lady was trying to defend her grandson and she jumped on the cop's back, and the shot was taken at some point, a photo, I should say, was taken at some point of the cops restraining her with his hand on her neck or something like that.
Yes,
people thought that they got out of control in trying to stop these protesters, but they were told to disperse, and people didn't disperse.
Well, and again, it all depends on what line of media you want to read. From what I read and was told, there were people in the mall shopping, and those people, the grandmother and the 13-year-old were shopping, and those particular police officers maybe were a little overzealous, and they just took this kid, a 13-year-old, for a protester that may or may not have known what was going on.
Wrong place, wrong time.
And I guarantee you that if Marc Cox was there at the wrong place at the wrong time with his 13-year-old and somebody had his son in a chokehold, would you just sit there and say, please, officer?
Maybe not, but would I jump on the officer's back?
If he had your son in a chokehold,
I don't know. No, I don't know if I would or not.
You'd say.
That's a big step.
Well, so it's
if you jump on a police officer's back, you have to expect what's going to happen next.
Exactly, but if he has your child in a chokehold, you're just going to sit there and let it happen?
Hard to say. It would depend on the situation.
You're right. It's impossible to say. You just hope that you don't ever have to be in that position. But far too many people that are trying to express themselves find themselves, because we haven't had a whole lot of civil unrest, especially in the St. Louis area, in decades until the last 2 years.
And I think the lawsuits against it are intended for the very purpose of this change, which is to reduce the responsibility of the people who have violated the law in some way.
And maybe there's a little. I think there's sensitivity from the police officers that have to be implemented, and protesters have to understand they can't just do whatever they want to do. That didn't happen in the 60s until violence was brought to them. When violence is brought to a group of protesters, that's different, and that's what caused most of the uprisings in Watts and Newark and Cleveland and Los Angeles, because peaceful protests were taken into a whole new level by law enforcement. I don't know if that was the case.
I don't. Yeah, right.
Case.
Yeah, I don't know.
I know that was the case.
I don't disagree with that.
I know that was the case in the 60s. I don't know that was the case in.
I think people were looking for excuses in this particular case. Scott Jones, thank you, my friend. Have a good weekend.
My pleasure, guys.
Don't punch that radio as you're leaving if anybody calls in.
It's kind of fun. Hey, having an opinion is what it's all about, and being able, like my buddy Nick over here, we go at it all the time sometimes. But guess what? If you can't have civil agreements about race, politics, and religion, then what fun is it?
Thank you.
If you can't do it reasonably and intelligently, don't do it.
As you leave the studio, grab a cannoli, not a gun.
All right, I will.
All right, from Amageddon.
They made me check my gun at the door.
That's a good thing. Scott Jones, thank you. We're going to take a break. 314-969-9797.